Welcome to Dance Ninja's Masterclass teacher training. This week, what we're going to focus on is we're going to start by reviewing homework that was given to those of you in the Masterclass, and just give you some tips on how you can improve in different sections and let you know what was really great and what could be improved. Then we're going to answer any questions you have, either the written in questions I got, as well as any live questions that you guys send in right now. Anytime from now until the end, you can put your questions in, and I'll answer them when I feel it's the appropriate time. Also, you'll be able to raise your hand if you want to chat live rather than typing your chat. You can always click to request to speak, and then it'll pull up your video, and you can block the video if you want, so it's just the audio. But it'll allow us to talk in real time together rather than with a little bit of a delay between when I'm talking and when you add the chat into the chat window. After the questions, I'm going to share with you a really cool thing that happened. One of the teachers that's going through this training made an offer that resulted in him getting 20 private lessons booked in less than 24 hours. So I'm going to share what he did and the secret sauce behind why it works so well, so that you can maybe do something for yourself that's similar. And then I'm also going to give you a little bit of extra homework. For Module 1, it's technically homework that goes in Module 1, but it's more like bonus homework then, and it's also really going to be homework for Module 5. So if you guys are feeling overloaded with stuff, don't worry, you can always come back to it in Module 5. But I'm going to give it to you early on because it is sort of prep homework for everything else. And again, if you have any questions, just pop them in the chat. Otherwise, let's jump into reviewing some of the homework. Okay, so the first thing that I want to review is your goals, the 3 fundamentals that everybody chose. And right off the bat, I want to say Gonzo, Gail, Connor, and Boris, great goals. And all of them were really sound, awesome goals. I'll keep them in mind as we go through this training. And I want you also to keep them in mind as we go through this training. And I'm going to show you how they might tweak some of the things that you do during this training. Now, one thing to note on the goals is that most of you had multiple goals for each section. So if we talk about why you wanted to improve your dancing, most of you had multiple reasons why you want to improve your dancing. And then you had multiple reasons why you want to improve your teaching and multiple reasons why you want to improve your processes, right? And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with having multiple goals. I will say that if you can narrow your focus down to one very specific goal, it will help with your niche. And that's more of an advanced concept, so it's not something you guys need to be worrying about right now. But as you continue your career, I want you to think about how you can narrow down to one goal. So, for example, one of the students mentioned their goal for improving their teaching was to build the size and diversity of their community and communicate their passion and knowledge of dance in a way that protects dancers' bodies, right? So there's a few things going on there, but let's say they narrowed their focus to protecting dancers' bodies. If that's the thing they're really passionate about and they focus solely on that, then eventually they can become someone that really, like, everybody goes to learn how to protect their body, right? And people will hire them for events because they have a very clear focus that is better. I don't want to say better, but they're going to have more knowledge in that area than anyone else, because everything they think about when they go into practicing, improving their teaching, improving their dancing, things like that, is all about, okay, how do I do this in a way that protects my body, right? And it's just like, for me, my main focus is providing amazing dances, right? And for my students, for myself, the goal is to have amazing dances. And if I change that mindset, or if I don't have that particular singular focus, I'm not going to be as good at doing that as if I have that singular focus, right? If I want to not only improve their dancing, but I also want their style to look a specific way, and I want their look to be a way, their feeling to be a way, their emotions to be a way. Like, those are all good secondary goals, but they distract me from my main goal, right? And so if you have a main goal, all those other goals can be secondary going into it and help make it even stronger, right? So for me, like, yeah, I want to improve my students, not just in their having more amazing dances, but yes, I want them to feel better. I want them to look better and all those things. But the whole reason I want those other things is so that they have more amazing dances, right? So if you guys look at your goals, try to think, what's your most important goal? What's the thing that maybe all the other goals will help with fulfilling this ultimate goal? And that will take you, I think, another step beyond the normal teacher. And again, having multiple goals is great. At first, that's often what happens. And then as you see how things fit together, you might see how they tie into one overarching goal. You know, for me, the concept of creating fusion, or creating a whole dance scene that's designed around, you know, being able to dance with anyone to any music, that came from a whole bunch of different goals of like just improving their dancing that came together. That was like, oh, there's this overarching theme of just making every dance amazing by having amazing dance connection to music and connection to any partner, any music, any partner, right? So it's sort of developed into this overarching goal of amazing dances for me from having multiple goals. So stick with the multiple goals, but start looking for what's your overarching theme. So when you're looking for your minimum, maximum number of students, deciding how many private lessons am I going to take on, I want to just say, Boris, I saw your numbers. I believe they were 1 minimum and 3 maximum, that couples, and that is great. I think that's a perfect starting point for you. And I'd say pretty much everyone, you want to keep your numbers really low. Gail, you had a 2 and a 6, a great minimum. Your maximum, I might lower it a little bit and go more to a 3 or 4 for right now, while you're starting out, trying to figure out your pricing. And I'll talk more about that. You might not want to do that. I'm going to give you some suggestions on that when I discuss this more, when I'm answering Connor's question in just a little bit. So just keep in mind, you might want to lower that, but we'll discuss the details later. Connor, your min-max 20 to 30 is great, I think. Although I might lower both your minimum and maximum depending on your goals and your specific situation. Based on what I've seen from you so far, I think your minimum probably could be 20, but your maximum might want to be brought down. And actually, I'm going to give you a very different way of going about your raising your rates. Or I don't want to say very different, but a slightly different adjustment on it when we jump into that section of class. And everyone that is thinking about, you know, if you're teaching private lessons, pay attention to the suggestions I give to Connor and Gail and everyone here about these raising your rate minimum maximums, because this is going to be important for you at some point in your career. You're going to want to adjust things. So you want to know the strategy and the ideas behind it. So we'll come back to that in just a little bit. The other homework that we had, bonus homework, was the Code of Honor. And Stephanie, Gonzo, Boris, great codes. If for those of you that didn't see their codes of honor, you might want to jump into the comments section of the masterclass and just take a look at theirs for inspiration for your own, right? So you can see them, scroll through the comments, and you'll see their different suggestions, or not suggestions, but what they use as their own codes of honor. And if you don't know what a code of honor is, basically a code of honor is the idea that whenever you have a relationship, you want to have established guidelines or codes that you both agree to, so that you make the relationship work really well and go really smoothly. And even with your own self, you want to have your own code of honor with yourself, that when you come across struggles and difficult decisions in your life, you can look at what's my code, and you can make a decision based on knowing what your goals are and who you want to be, rather than just being in a sticky situation and just randomly choosing something. You want to choose something that goes with your goals of who you want to be. So you're not randomly choosing or choosing something that doesn't fit with who you want to be in a stressful situation. For example, one of my codes for myself is to share my fears. If I have a fear, then my code is to share that fear with a person I have that fear with. Or at least with someone, to get rid of that fear, to not let it hold over me, you know? So an example for me was when I jumped from going from $150 an hour to $200 an hour. That was scary when I went to my first student and was like, I just increased my rates, and you used to pay $150, now you pay $200. So rather than just saying that, I used my code of honor. I was like, I'm nervous. And so I just said, I have a fear. Do you mind if I share it with you? And they're like, sure. And I was like, so I just raised my rates from, you know, $150 to $200 an hour. And I realized when I went with you, you're used to this other price. Maybe you don't think I'm worth this other price. I don't know. I'm afraid to actually share my pricing with you. And I want you to know you're totally welcome to say that, you know, $200 is too much, like, and you don't want to work with me. That's totally fine. My fear is in just sharing it with you. It's not even in your answer, your response to me. Like if you say yes or no, that's fine. But the fear is even just like admitting that I think that I could be worth that amount. And so I shared that with the first person, and they were like, yeah, totally fine. They jumped in, we did a private lesson. The second person I went to with that, not only did they pay me the $200, but they tipped me on top, right? And so it's really valuable to have a code of honor, so that when you're in that situation, you don't wuss out, right? Like probably what would have happened if I didn't have that code of honor is I would have just said, we'll just do 150. That's what you're used to paying. So let's go ahead and do that. Right. And I'd still be stuck at that 150 mark. Whereas now I've been paid at over $500 an hour for lessons, for private lessons, and for group classes. Right. And you can use these techniques that I'm giving you for private lessons or group classes. Anyway, my point is having a code of honor, really great for keeping yourself to your goals and to your word and to how you want to be and how you want to show up in your life. And it doesn't mean you can't adjust things as you go. It just means here's what I'm deciding to do now, and I'm going to live up to that until I change my mind and change my code. Gail and Boris, I saw your teaching assets and love them. They're great. There is something I want to talk about within Gail's, specifically. Gail, you mentioned one of your teaching assets. Here, let's see if I can share my screen with you guys. So I want to bring you back to your goals when we're talking about teaching assets. And so here's your teaching assets. We've got to inspire students. You can make them or get them to feel good connection for the first time, right? That inspires them. So any way you get them to feel good connection for the first time inspires them. And it also improves your students. I would say absolutely one of the techniques for inspiring students is when they feel good connection for the first time, that inspires them. Yes, this inspires and improves them, but I'd like you to change your wording from when they feel good connection to something else. What does good mean? Does it mean clear, strong, right? Is a good connection a clear connection? Is it a strong, or is it light? Is it physical, mental, emotional? What does that mean for you, a good connection? The more specific you can be, the more clear you are on when you've achieved that goal for them, right? Plus, one of your goals, as you mentioned in your goals, is to help them enjoy dancing more, right? You mentioned down here, improve my students, help them enjoy dancing more. And when you use, let me actually go back to myself. So this is something that I've delved a lot into on improving your students, making them enjoy dancing more is something very important to me. And one of the things when you use the words good and bad in situations with your students, they start to have really great dances with people who do it the way that you taught was good, but they start to have worse dances with people who do it the opposite way. Right? So I've actually started getting rid of the language good and bad or right and wrong completely from my language. And Gail, I know you know this already because you've done a lot of my classes and things, but I want to remind you that this is a situation where you want to be more specific about your what you mean by that, so that one, you're not setting up your students for failure. Right? Like I don't want to say failure, but failure for certain students that they dance with or certain people they dance with. And you're just getting more clear for yourself. And for those of you that don't really understand, I know Gail already knows this concept, so I don't need to go into more detail for her. But for those of you that don't really understand this, I want to give you my experience of this and how it happened for me. I was taught that leads are supposed to lead, the dance, and follows are supposed to follow it, and that's what's right. And if follows back lead or add anything in on their own, that is wrong, right? And so when I first started dancing, when I found dancers that followed me, it was awesome. It was amazing, right? Our dances got better and better. But then those follows that back led, it annoyed me, and it got really annoying to the point where I didn't want to dance with those people anymore, right? Those dances, all of a sudden, at first when I danced with them, it was fine. I didn't even know about back leading, so it didn't bother me. But then I learned that it was wrong, and my dancing with them started getting annoying. And the more they did it, the more annoying it got, right? The better dancer I got, the more aware I became of all the different ways they could back lead, the more annoying it became. So instead of learning follows should always follow, if I had learned follows can follow or lead, right? And those are just two options. During this class, we're going to focus on follows following because that's what I'm really good at teaching, right? As a teacher, you don't have to teach both ends, but letting people know there's two sides of the story and either one is fine. Here's what we're going to focus on because this is what I know how to do really well. But on your own time, I want you to figure out how to have amazing dances with people that, with follows that lead. Right? Just switch your mindset. If I had gone about that way, I would have saved like 5 or 10 years of my life of just annoying dances with follows who were back leading, right? And now I have awesome dances with follows that back lead because I just follow it while leading everything else. I figured out how to do that, but it could have saved me time and frustration if someone just didn't tell me that it was wrong at first. So if your goal is to have students have amazing dances, then I recommend getting rid of the right and wrong, the good and bad, basically anything that causes judgment. I'd get rid of that and talk more about what you're good at teaching and what you're going to teach them versus other options they can learn elsewhere. Or if you're really good at teaching both, teach both. Oh, another thing, Gail, you mentioned in your teaching assets for improving students, you mentioned that you sometimes use analogies, visualizations, and shapes to improve your students, right? And I think that's great. I totally agree. Those can improve your students. I want to also point out that some of those things, depending on what they are, might also inspire your students as well. And I'd like you to break them down into more specific things, like what is the specific analogy that you use? What's a specific visualization you use? And there's two reasons I want you to do this. One reason that's good for everyone, why everyone should be breaking these down as much as possible, is because if you have it written down really clearly what you do, it makes it easy to remember. So when you go into a class, you can pull that right out and easily do it. For example, the Superman analysis is one technique that I use, right? And And I've written that down, and I know that technique, like it's something that doesn't just pop into my mind occasionally. Every time I go into a class, I look at my possible things that I could teach. I see Superman analysis, and I know going into that class, oh, this might be something I want to use. So it's right on the top of my brain, rather than it just popping out whenever it happens to come into my brain. Right? Same with the Goldilocks technique. Any of techniques that you have that are really specific that you use, write them down, and then they'll more likely come when you're ready for, or when you're spontaneously teaching. It might pop in spontaneously into your class, but also when you're preparing your lessons, you can look at your list and go, oh, this one concept works really well right here. So get more specific. When you have something that's like kind of broad, you can leave it broad, but then like have like a drop down list of things underneath it that are like, okay, these are all my analogies. These are all my visualization techniques and things like that. Does that make sense? If you guys have any questions, pop them into the screen. Brennan, I love what you just said there. You said that this webinar is making you realize that you're far too general in your descriptions and need to spend more time, developing and clarifying your list of possible things to use. And absolutely, that's what I want to say with everyone, is the more specific you can be, the easier it is to teach your lessons, as well as when you get into describing your classes, like when you tell people that you're going to teach them the Superman technique or something like that, all of a sudden they're like, ooh, that's cool. So you can use that to be really specific on what you're going to teach in your class descriptions, as well as have that curiosity base that can pull people into your class that are just curious what it is, which are two things you want to do in class descriptions. You want to be really clear and specific on what you teach, as well as give a little bit of curiosity to get those people that maybe haven't learned that concept in there going, ooh, I want to learn that just because I don't know what it is. If you guys would like to jump on the call, I'd love for one of you to share one of your concepts for teaching and why you think it improves or inspires your students. Because one thing that I think is super important is that you have a clear reason behind your why, so that it's not just, you're coming up with a concept and you say, oh, this improves students, but you don't really know why. You don't have proof on why. So with everything that any asset that you have where you're like, this is a method I'm using, I want you to be able to back it up with a solid why. So if you're willing to do like a one-on-one with me right now, raise your hand and say, yes, I'd like to explain one of the things I teach and why I teach it. And I might grill you a little. And it's okay if no one wants to do that, that's fine. I know it's a little scary to be put on the spot and try to explain your goal. So it's not mandatory. It's just something I think would add a little bonus for you to be able to yes, I am clear, I know my why, and for you to have a process to go through to be able to make sure your why it makes sense to you.
As far as I understood, I shall say one of my goals, or no, one of my techniques, and I should say why it's improving my students, right?
Exactly. Do you have one in mind you already want to go through? I have one if you don't.
Yeah, I would say I would take the what do you think?
Oh, I saw hat games, and I was like, oh,
yeah, right.
That's interesting. What's that about?
Okay, yeah, sure. So hat game is something like a thing to improve the floor craft. Is that what you say?
Sure.
Floor craft? Yeah. So we have a little game that we put a hat on the heads of some followers. So there's couple dancing, of course, and some of the followers have a hat on their head, and some don't. And okay. The goal is to play a song, and whenever it stops, the followers should have a hat on their head. And so there are some rules how to grab the hat. So the leaders are just allowed to grab the hat and put it on the heads of their followers. Followers are never allowed to touch the hat. So if the leader is putting it a little weird on their heads and falls down, it's gone, and they are not allowed to put it back on the head. But other couples can take it and put it on their followers' head. And yeah, it has to be, of course, stolen during dancing. So it's not allowed to stop dancing and just take the hat or follow somebody and grab it. So they have to dance. And what else?
I think I get the general idea. Sounds really cool. So now I'm going to ask you, does it improve, inspire, or do both?
It does both.
Okay, so start with one. Why does it improve?
It improves their floor craft. We also sometimes are decreasing the floor space, so we're putting some poles or something at the edges, so they are a little bit narrowed, and so it improves their dancing on crowded dance floors at the end. Yeah, and seeing what is around them, not just focusing on themselves and on their partner, but also spreading their view on the dance floor.
Okay, so the two reasons that it's really good. One is obviously you're decreasing the floor space, and I have one idea for you on how to make that maybe even more valuable for them. But I want to talk about the second thing that I think I got cut off on was the value that of making them just pay attention to everyone else without even needing to tell them to do it. Right? Like you could just say, okay, I want you guys to dance and pay attention to everyone else in the room. But this is a way of kind of forcing them to do it without telling them it. So it's just creating a habit just as a byproduct of the game. So really great idea. Love it. The one thing I might add into it is there might be, I don't know how to do this, but maybe a penalty if they bump into someone else, right? So that they have that added, like, oh, I've got to make sure that I'm not bumping into anyone as I do this. So I really got to steal the hat without like my shoulder touching their shoulder or stepping on them or something like that. Anyway, really cool. Love that. The thing I want everyone else to understand is how like the why made sense, right? How when he answered it, that last bit was really about showing you how it actually does improve them. Now, what about inspiring them? How does it inspire them?
Well, it's I think it makes them.
It inspires them, I should say, or makes them love the class.
Yeah, because they are having fun, and they I think they also kind of love the game, and that's what they also hopefully tell others, and they enjoy it, I think.
Yeah, I think this one's really obvious in that like you're gonna see them all laughing and having a great time, right? So I think that's the thing that that makes this one really easy to see that it inspires them, is because they're just having a great time. And that's something you want to look for in your classes is, are my students enjoying this? You know, there's a few different ways you can feel that enjoyment. And one other way that popped into my head is when there's a lot of noise in the room. Oh, I see you now.
Hey.
And when there's a lot of noise in the room, I know as teachers it can be annoying as like, quiet, I need to talk or something like that. But one good thing about that is usually that means that people are engaged because they're talking with people. They're excited about something. So if you see smiles on their faces or you hear a lot of like talking going on, usually that's a sign that people are excited, people are inspired in some way with your class. And so those are the points where you might want to write down whatever you just did because whatever you just did is something you want to repeat and make sure happens more often in your classes.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Great, yes.
Awesome. Okay, I think that's all I had specifically for you here. Did you have any questions you wanted to throw out there while I've got you here?
Just a quick question. Do you have a name or something like that for the question, what do you think? What is the answer to this and that? Do you have a technique there, or is something that you use?
For what?
For the when you want to explain something and you ask the students, what do you think? What happens, or what has to be done to make it happen? This one move or this technique or so.
So if I'm asking somebody, like, what do you guys think? Like, if I'm trying to get from them a way to give answers, is that what you mean? Or
no, more like letting them answer the question themselves, so that they think about it and think how could this move work? What technique do you use, or yeah, so that they are thinking actively, so to say, not that you're telling everything and that's it. That's how you do it.
So instead of you teaching them everything, a technique to teach themselves almost, right?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, I would say that's built into my fail to succeed theory, which is, if you just, the brief example is, first, like, just let them try something and be okay with them failing at it, and give them a couple tries at it. You know, sometimes I'll move straight into okay, let me break it down and help you guys through it. But sometimes I'll get them into small groups and let them actually work it out for themselves. I think the small group aspect of it is really nice because it doesn't force them to be by themselves trying to figure it out. You know, they have teammates that they can work with. So if you put them in a group of 4, that I find that to be the most ideal small group for something like this. And 3 can work as well. It depends on how many people you have in the space. But 4 people, they're all trying to figure out, like, how do we do this thing? You give them, you know, a couple of minutes to work on it, and then you come back to them and say, okay, what are your solutions? And you actually have them share their solutions. And then if they didn't cover a solution that you wanted to teach, then you go on to teach your solution, right? But you let them get that chance to do it first. Also, the each one teach one is kind of set up to do that as well. I'm not going to go into detail on that. I know you already know that technique, so I'll just mention that that's a possibility that kind of segues them into that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Awesome. Anything else?
Not at the moment.
Okay, I'm going to kick you off for a sec then. Thanks, Boris.
Thank you.
Here we have some customer journeys. Sales customer journey is a stranger, a free tester. The things that are underlined are the things she already does and she offers, right? The things that are not underlined, like the big event and the teacher training, are things she doesn't do yet, right? And then the 2 and 3 means after stranger, it says stranger, 2 and or 3. That means she feels the ideal next best step for them is to either give them a free taster lesson or give them a local dance, right? And it doesn't say free or not. I would recommend that it be their first time at the local dance for free. Stephanie says it's not in focus. So let me see if I can blow it up and a little bit better. So you can see the whole list here: stranger, free tester, local dance, group class, subscribe, private lessons, scene building, local workshop, big event, teacher training, or merchandise. And I'll focus on stranger for right now. So a stranger can go to a free taster, number 2, or a local dance, number 3. When you're focusing on a stranger, you want to make sure there's the lowest barrier of entry because they barely know you. They don't know how good you are. So giving them something for free is really important. And I see Gail says that she does have a free pass for their first dance. And for those of you that don't really understand this yet, think about the transition someone has. Like if I were to have asked you guys to do this whole training without giving you that free content that I did at the beginning, those of you who don't know me wouldn't have any reason to believe that I have enough value to provide in this masterclass, right? So you probably wouldn't have done the masterclass. Whereas by giving that free stuff up front, you now know you can trust me and go, okay, I kind of know who this person is. Maybe I'll take their lesson, right? And the next step is usually actually to offer something really low priced, right? After that free taster. But the first thing you do is something absolutely free, right? And so whether it be a free class, a free dance, either of those is usually acceptable. And then you want to move on. So then once they've taken the free taster, what's the next best thing to offer them? And Gail mentions that for her, the Hawaii Jitterbugs, sometimes her, but sometimes other people, they go on to 3 or 4, which is a local dance or group class. Right? And so if this free taster is a free group class, then the group class, like a paid group class, is a perfect next step, or a paid local dance is also a good next step, especially if it's right after the free taster. That's a great next step. I would say another thing you might want to offer them is for them to subscribe, right? Because at this stage, if they're not ready to take on the local class or the local dance, for some reason they got to go, like you want to be able to contact them later to follow up and say, hey, if you enjoyed the lesson, take a group class. Or probably even better would be to send them a survey that asks them if they enjoyed the lesson or not. And if they did, then to tell them about the group class, maybe even offer them a discount on their very first paid group class. Or something like that, and or just send them more free content, right? To keep them thinking about you and remembering they enjoyed you, because over the next month, they might forget about your dances. So if you are keeping in contact with them, they have other options of things they might do on a Saturday night or Friday night or something like that. And so if you keep reminding them, dance is awesome, here's cool things about dance, they might actually, the next time they go, oh, I have a free Friday, what am I going to do? Oh, yeah, that's dance that I've been thinking about for the last few weeks, but haven't been able to attend. Now I can go. Right? Whereas if you don't keep in contact with them, if they forget about you, there's 100 other things that they could do on a Friday night, and they're going to do one of those other things. So I'd say, I think, yes, 3 or 4 is the first thing you want to do, but make sure that you get them to subscribe as well, so that if they don't do one of those, you have a chance for them to do that later, and you're not just hoping that they're going to do it. The next thing is, once they're at a local dance, it shows the group class is something you have them go to, and that's all. The other thing I would suggest is that if people are coming to the local dance, I'm guessing some people will come to the dance and have skipped the free taster. And that's a great point to get them back into that free taster. So I would recommend reminding them about the free taster if they haven't tried it yet, and offering that to them at the local dance. And there's certain nights where you might skip it just because there's hardly anyone there. Or maybe you even just go up to them personally. Instead of making a group announcement, if there's only 2 or 3 people that came in after the free taster, go up to them personally and let them know that there was the opportunity for this. They missed it out here. Give them a flyer that lets them in next time, or a coupon or something. Or even if you don't have flyers or coupons, just write on a piece of paper and sign it and say, their next lesson is free. And the nice thing about that handwritten one is it really does feel like only they can get that because you wrote it out for them. So they're more likely to do it. And the other thing that I would say on that is I'd give it an expiration usually of like 1 month from now or within this month, you know, if it's the beginning of August or mid-August, say anytime in August, this, you know, this expires at the end of August, something like that, that lets them know they need to come in and get it soon, right? Urgency is huge for things like that. For anything you're offering, if you can offer urgency and it makes sense, then that's extremely valuable. And it's not that you wouldn't offer it to them again. You could, if they missed it and they come back to you and say, oh, I missed it, I really wanted to get the free taster, is there some way that I can still get it? You could write them another one that expires next month. That's fine, right? If they took the time to actually go to you and ask for it, then help them out if you can. At the same time, most people, if they missed it and they really wanted to go to it, they'll pay for it. They'll be like, you know what, I missed the chance for the free one, I'll just go ahead and pay the $7 or something like that. So it's not a big deal. Like, if they don't come back to you, they'll probably come, if they're interested, they'll probably come anyway and just pay. The other thing that I want to say about this section is, when you're at your local dance, one thing that you want to try to transition them into group classes is give them some free tips that entice them to take your group class. You know, if maybe they're not on your email list or something like that, or maybe they just don't pay attention to email. So if you give them, you know, a tip of the night where it's something that you taught in class this week, or you're teaching in more detail next week, right? That can inspire them to come to class, right? And that, there's two ways of doing that. Let me show my screen again, just because I don't think this needs, you don't need to see that. So there's two ways of enticing someone by giving them a free tip of the night. One way is to teach something that you taught in the class already, right? You can say, oh, this is something I taught in our class and I'm really excited about it. Here's the idea. And teach them it. It should be really short, definitely less than 5 minutes. If you can teach something in less than 1 minute, even better. I recommend, you know, something that they can experience, where they actually try it out and experience. This is doing the tip. This is not doing the tip. So they can feel the difference it makes in their dancing. And then you can say, how many people were in class today? And people raise their hand. We went into a lot more detail on this, right? And people, yeah, and say, so if you want more tips and details on tips like these, come to our class next week and we'll be giving detailed examples of this stuff, right? The other way you can do it is not to go into class and not to give a tip for this class, but to give a tip for next class. And you can say the exact same thing. The only thing you miss on that one is that you can't have people say, you know, those of you who were in class today, like, did we go into more detail on this? You can't do that there. So you're missing the social proof of people taking the class and finding value from it. So does that make sense to you guys? Do you see those two ways of doing it? The power of the second one of doing something that's going to come in the next class is it might excite people to go into that next class. Right? The power of the first one is social proof, having people say, yeah, I was in that class. Yeah, it helped my dancing. So test both of those. Try them both out. See which one works best for you. Probably most likely you're just going to want to change it up and do one maybe more often, but the other one's still doing often as well. Gail, you said you didn't mention, we encourage all new people to join your Facebook group so they can find out when your next classes are starting. And then you asked, that's a way of subscribing, right? Yes, absolutely. That is a way of subscribing. There is one negative side to Facebook, or a couple negative sides to Facebook subscribing. And that's that when you subscribe in Facebook, Facebook has control of your list. So you don't actually get their contact info. If Facebook decides that you're doing something they don't like, they can actually take your access away. They can close your group or things like that. So you no longer have access to message these people. So that's one of the biggest reasons. The other reason, though, that's super important is your ability to segment and message very specific groups is very limited with Facebook. Whereas with email, you can get really specific with who you want to email, what you want to email them. So for instance, if you have a group of people that only took the beginner class and never started paying for lessons, you can send them very specific things that are directed to them that you can't send that you can't send to everyone else, or you don't want to send to everyone else because it doesn't make sense to them. Like, I don't want to send a discount for their first paid lesson if they've already started paying for lessons, right? And I don't even want to send them an email trying to get them to come to a lesson if they're already taking lessons, right? So you can pick and choose who you want to email. Whereas with Facebook groups, you'd have to make groups for each different thing, and then you'd have to take them out of one group, put them into other groups. It'd get really complex to do that through Facebook. So you can segment a little bit in Facebook, but not very well. So if you want to get really more advanced, I highly recommend going through email and using something like Aweber or MailChimp. MailChimp is maybe a good starting point, but something like Aweber is probably the best to go with once you get up and running. And if you're making a decent amount of money off of dance, then I recommend ClickFunnels or Infusionsoft, which are higher end things. They cost $200 to $300 a month. But if you're making, several $1,000s off of dance every month, then it's worth that investment, I think. But if you're not making, $2-3 grand at least off of it, then I'd go with one of the lower end options like Aweber or MailChimp is free. But I would do, honestly, for anyone in this training, if you're starting to make money, I'd probably do Aweber. It starts for as low as $19 a month, and then you have a system that's really powerful that starts you up and gets you going for $20 a month. That's $240 a year, right? So that's a few private lessons and it's already paid for. How do you set your pricing to interact with the local market value? So how can you set your rates to be attractive to customers without upsetting local teachers in your community who you may want to refer students to you and vice versa in the future, right? So the first thing I'm going to say is that when I price my lessons, I try to avoid thinking what other people charge. And for like 10 years, I did not ask anyone else what they charged and just like ignored everything else and focused on what makes sense for me, right? Because like most people charge prices because they randomly looked at someone else and they just chose, right? And so they don't have a strategy that makes sense for them. So you want to really think about like, what can I afford to price my lessons at on the low end? What do I need to charge as a minimum to be able to make my rent and things like that, assuming that I sell out and things like that. And I can give you guys a very specific guide for pricing your lessons. In one of our future modules, I'll do that. But right now, I just want you to have the concept, don't price based off what other people are doing. Price based off what value you bring and what you can afford to do, right? And start low and then work your way up. If you sell out your lessons, raise your price. Sell out your lessons, raise your price, right? If you're sold out, it makes sense to raise your rates. It doesn't matter if other people are charging $20 an hour and you're charging $200 an hour. If you're sold out, it doesn't matter, right? And as far as without upsetting local teachers, there's two things that might upset local teachers. You might upset them because they didn't, because you're charging too much or too little. If it's because you're charging too little, the thing I would tell them is, look, I'm a new teacher. My goal is to raise my rates, but right now I need to try things out and get new students in. And if I charge too much, they're not going to come to me, so right now I need to lower my price. And I will say that like, when I tell people this, I tell them that I'm a new teacher and that's why I'm charging less than other teachers. So if they want higher quality instruction, they can go to you. If they can't afford higher quality instruction, they can come to me. So that's what I would tell the local teachers if they argued with you. Most teachers aren't even going to know your rates. They aren't going to care. They aren't going to pay attention. Most of the time, the fear is in our head more than anyone else's. Now, that said, if you're charging higher rates than everyone else, the thing to recognize is that most teachers don't mind that. Like if you're charging higher rates than them, they feel like they have an advantage because they charge less and they're better than you, or they think they're better than you, and they're like, sweet, I can get more people to take my lessons because I charge less, right? That said, they don't really have the strategies behind what they charge, so they might not be able to get students or not, but their mindset is thinking they can because they charge less than you. So I wouldn't worry too much if you charge more. Usually if you have a fear there, again, it's in your own head. That said, you can always use my fear rule and talk to people and share with them what you're doing, what you're afraid of, and see if they have any suggestions for you on how to overcome it, or if it's just a fear you're going to have to be okay with. Does that make sense? If you have any questions on that, write them in. All right. The next question is there an ideal difference between your minimum and maximum numbers, or does it scale? This person is asking this because the example I provided was like a minimum of 5 questions and a maximum of 7 or students, right? 5 students to 7 students for private lessons. But if your minimum is 20, should your maximum be like 30 instead of 22 to ensure that you don't immediately raise your prices? And I would say, yes, if you already know your rate is pretty solid, if you're comfortable not looking to raise your rate anytime soon, then sure, have a bigger distance between your minimum and your maximum. But most of you right now probably chose your prices because of random choices, right? Not because you actually know that that's the best price for you, but because that's what someone else charged, or that's just what felt right for you, or something like that. So if you haven't really tested and gotten a feel for when people are starting to turn you down and tell you, I really can't afford that, right? Then I think you should keep raising your price faster until you start getting turned down frequently, right? And frequently means, I would say, at least 50% of the time. If you're not getting turned down 50% of the time due to your price, then I would raise your price and keep going. And you can choose different amounts. 50% is what I would recommend starting with if you don't have something. But if you really don't like being rejected, you could increase it to 70% to increase that feeling that you have of like, yes, like I'm getting satisfaction each time someone says yes. But honestly, like I'd recommend 50%. Some people even recommend as low as like 25% of the time. And it's not a bad idea to go with 25%, because if you think about it, if you get, if you were to able to raise your rate to say $200 an hour and only 1 out of 4 people accepts, right? Versus you had 100% success rate at $50 an hour, right? Basically, by going to 4 people, right, you could make $200 at $50 an hour, or you could go to 4 people and only 1 of them accepts and you still make $200. And then you have those other 3 hours to improve your dancing, improve your teaching and stuff like that, so that you can bring higher quality lessons to your students. So I would say until you start getting, rejected consistently for your price, I would recommend shortening that distance. And Connor specifically, I think for you, I would recommend actually doing something slightly different, because you have 20 students at your minimum, and and you got 20 students, right? So if you are consistently at that high range of 20 students, then what I would do is I would raise your rate for the 21st student, right? And I would keep your rate the same for your first 20 students for a little while. And then I would go, let's say you're charging $50 an hour. For your 21st student, I would go to $60 an hour. For your 22nd student, I would go to $70. For your 28th, I would go to $80, until you start getting over 50% of them rejecting you. And then that's your next price to raise with everyone, to go back to other people with. That's a super fast way to raise your rate very quickly. And anybody could actually do that right away if you want. If you wanted to test out and just find out when do people start not taking my lessons due to price? Then just go ahead and increase for each additional person you add on to find out what price is new, and then go back to your other students and raise the price with them one at a time, just like we talked about in the Raise Your Rates lesson. If there's any questions on that, pop them in. The one other thing I want to mention about that is some of you, most of you are going to want to also improve your ability to sell your lessons, right? And we'll talk about this more in a future module. But one of the things I want to point out that's super easy, one question you can ask that will help ensure someone is really turning you down for your price and not some other reason, is to ask them this one question. If they say, oh, I can't do it because it's too expensive, I want you to ask, if it weren't for the cost, is there any other reason that you would not take the lesson, right? Because a lot of people actually, their real reason is not because of the price. It's actually because you haven't sold them that it's worth it for them. And so they might come up with some other reasons. They might be like, I just don't have the time, or, I just don't think I can improve, or who knows what their reason is going to be. But if you can help them get past those reasons, they might be more willing to be fine with the price. I know that works for me with my $3,000 program all the time. I say, if it weren't for the price, would you do this? And then if I can get them through and help them come over their other concerns, they almost always take me up on it when I get to pricing and come back and go, so is price still an issue, or are you ready to go? And usually they're ready to go. Or if the price is still an issue, I might help them and work with them on a payment plan or some other way. And Gail says, that's an excellent point. I have someone I need to ask that the next time I see them. Awesome. So Boris, you ask, how do you do that with raising rates to the next person over your minimum? People are talking about it, what they are paying, right? I mean, for me, I'm working one-on-one with people. So normally they're not checking in with someone else and asking what price I'm offering. But if they did ask someone else, I would tell them why. I would say they got in earlier. They got in when my rates were still lower and they were grandfathered in. And whereas you guys, have paid more. I mean, it's the same as you guys here. You guys got in on this masterclass while I'm charging, a much lower price. I'm doubling, tripling the price of it in future years. But you guys got in while it was super low priced. Same thing with my private lesson. My first private lesson student paid $2,000. Then the next one paid $2,500, then $3,000. And I actually did a few in a row at each price range, but I raised it, and they know that other people got it because they got in early. The question is what I'm doing for you worth what you're paying me, right? And that's the key. If what I'm providing you is worth what you're paying me, then we're all good, right? And if it's not, I don't want you taking the lessons from me anyway at that price, right? I want to find someone that's better for you anyway. And if you word, like Boris, you said, it could feel like a punishment to them just because they are later, they have to pay more. I would say if that's your fear, I would state that to them and say, I have this fear that you're going to be upset because of this. Maybe even before you tell your pricing to them, right? And most people will probably be fine with it, but maybe they won't. Maybe you won't be able to raise your rate because of your specific market. I don't think that's the case. My guess is that people will be like, no, I understand. That makes sense. And they'll go into it. But I do think you do need to work with where you're at and adjust to your group of people so that it works for you. This is just what has worked for me. Oh, one other thing that I think will be really helpful is getting them out of thinking about dollars per hour and getting them thinking about results, right? That's a huge difference. Most people, oh, well, I'm taking 10 lessons at $600, $60 an hour. Like, no. Don't think about that. Think about, okay, here, you know, yeah, you're getting 10 hours, but during those 10 hours, this is what we're going to cover. We're going to cover this, 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 and this, right? And that's why having your blueprint out and knowing and being able to show them all those things is so powerful, is because you can say, these are all the things you can learn with me in these 10 hours, right? You can go to someone else and maybe they'll cover all these things. I don't know. Ask them, see what they're going to teach you during those 10 hours, because odds are you're not going to learn as much. You're not going to get as far in your dance career or dancing, right? Not going to get as far as you are. You might end up having to take 20 or 30 lessons with them to get the same results from me in 10 lessons, right? So get clear on what your results you're offering them, and it will be easier to sell them on things. And I recommend doing packages, not per hour. Sure, you can bring them per hour things if they don't want to do a package, but I would start with packages. And we're going to be discussing that in the next module, or in module 5 in much more detail. Boris, you said, good point, but others to a lower price get the same result if it's a group class at least. Well, with group classes, I would say most likely you're going to raise the whole group class price for everyone at the same time, right? So most likely you're going to raise that for everyone. There are some exceptions to that, like advanced classes, right? I actually recommend charging more for advanced classes than beginner classes, because people are more interested in dance. They're willing to pay more and other things. So there's a little bit difference in group classes. I see that makes sense to you now. Awesome. James, you said, what do you think about selling packages of lessons for a discount? Absolutely. I think it's a great idea. We're going to get into packages of lessons later. So that'll be module 5 that we'll be talking about packages. So I do think a discount is good. I wouldn't do too big of a discount, but yes, a discount is smart. 10, 20%, something like that. And there's one more question I wanted to answer today, and then I'm going to call it, I'm going to end it for today. So the question was, do you make considerations in pricing for dancers who otherwise could not afford your services? One of my goals is to increase the diversity of the tango community, particularly after seeing how diverse and vibrant the swing community is. So have you ever offered discounts in order to encourage a younger audience to try dancing? And absolutely, yes, I offer discounts and deals for people that can't afford it. The one thing I will say is that I wouldn't do huge discounts for students without some form of reciprocity. In other words, like, I do things where if you agree to do this, I'll give you the class for free, right? But you have to be willing to do something for me. You have to be willing to work for it rather than just giving the class for free because you're a student. I'll give like a 10% discount for students or things like that. That's a good idea. But don't go too far without getting some reciprocity. Because if they're not willing to put in the time, then I think it's rude of them to expect you to give it for free or such a dramatic discount. And there's actually some really cool things you can do with trade-offs that we can discuss in upcoming modules. So I'll put that on the homework, or for myself, is to talk about creative ways of getting people to be able to take classes for free or for less, while making it easy on you. So one of the students in my masterclass got inspired by some of the material they were going through, and he decided to offer a sale, and he sold 20 lessons in 24 hours. And so I want to explain what he did and show you kind of the secret sauce behind it, what the important points are that you need to copy and do so that you can have similar results for yourself. So the first thing is he offered a sale. Right? He said, hey, I am doing a sale, and he did it because he wanted to raise money for a training that he was going to, right? He was going to go to a dance event, and he had already decided actually that he couldn't afford it, so he wasn't going to go, but he decided to open up a sale of 25 lessons at a discounted rate in order to raise the money to be able to go to this training, right? And he had a pre-registration deadline, right? He needed to sell those 25 lessons before the deadline of the event's pre-reg. And then he also mentioned how he's going to bring new ideas and a higher level of instruction back to his students in the dance scene that he teaches in, as well as build a relationship with those teachers that were teaching the training so that he could invite them to come teach a workshop in his scene later on if he built that relationship with them, right? So that's basically what he offered, and then within 24 hours, he had sold 20 lessons. And here's some of the reasons that I think are really important and valuable ways to make sure that you have a successful sale, right? The first thing is, like, right off the bat, offering the sale, like, you know, saying you're having a sale, rather than starting off with something else like, oh, you know, talking about you or what you want. Start off with what that you're offering them, and then go into the why and how it affects you and things like that. And so the other thing is, it was raising money for a good cause, right? Like, for not just a training for him to improve, but for him to bring new ideas and higher level instruction back to them, right? And also to build a relationship with that teacher or those teachers so that he could invite them to come teach for his students, right? These are all really great things that make them go, oh yeah, that's something I want to support, right? But really, the main thing behind this is there's a why behind the sale, right? It's not enough just to offer a sale just because, oh, you know, we're offering a sale because we're offering a sale. That doesn't grab people. It doesn't make them want to, or they just feel like it's going to happen at any time, so they'll get the next sale or something. But when you have a reason why you're doing it, and they understand, oh, there's a sale because of this, then it's a little bit more urgency involved, because that specific situation might not happen again, right? So you might not get that sale again. And as a side note, this is a technique that you would use once in a while, right? It's not something that you use consistently. I would say, you know, I mean, once a year, definitely easy. You could do it once a year, no problem. You could probably do it a few times a year, but probably not more than, you know, 3 or 4 times a year do you want to offer something in this style, right? There's other ways to offer sales, but as far as this style of a sale, this is how I would recommend. Once every 3 or 4 months is probably a good amount. And then the other thing is there's a deadline to it, right? He needed to raise the money by a certain date. So if he didn't raise that money by that date, obviously he was no longer going to offer the discounts. And so there's 2 ways that this discount could go away, right? There's actually a number of lessons, 25 lessons, right? Once he sold 25, the discount is gone. Or once the deadline hits, the discount is gone, right? And there's 2 different types of people, or 2 different ways that people get influenced by urgency, we call it, or scarcity, right? That something is going away feeling, right? Some people get motivated by a number, and like, you hear this, oh, there's only 25 spots, I better get in now before they go away. And you don't really know when it's going away. It's a curiosity, or not curiosity, but sort of a unknown deadline, because you don't know, is 25 going to sell today or next week, or who knows how long it's going to take for those 25 lessons to sell, right? So there's a whole bunch of people that will get motivated to buy because of that number discount. And then there's another group of people that get motivated by a deadline. They know, oh, the deadline's coming up, right? I better get in before the deadline, right? And now, he did it in 24 hours. I don't know that he even needed technically his deadline, because it sold out so quick, but he might not sell any up for the next like 5 days or however long it is until his deadline. And then at the deadline, he'll probably sell a few more, right? But sometimes you just close it out because you're sold out before the deadline even hits. And that's awesome. If that happens, you want to let your students know that it's sold out and that they're no longer available, because that lets them know for next time that they should be paying attention to get the lessons early on rather than waiting until the last minute, right? You ideally don't want a whole bunch of people coming in buying at the deadline. It does happen and it's helpful if you need it, but ideally you're training your students to buy early, right? To buy one of those first lessons. Now, those are the main things I think for doing an offer that really make a difference and make it really valuable. One, speak directly to the customer, right? Offer them specifically what you're doing for them, right? Explain the why, right? Raising money for training, and if you can, bring it back to relate about them. This is bonus information. This made it sell really well, but at least explain why you're raising it so they know it's not, oh, it's just another sale, right? It's a special sale. And then give a discount for a certain number as well as a deadline for that. And this one had an even stronger deadline because it was tied into the thing that's going on here. So if you can do that, that's even better, right? And as far as a why, if you're like thinking, oh, I don't have a training, that I want to go to right now, but I really could use the money. I've heard people do it for just paying their tax bill. Like, oh my gosh, I have a huge tax bill. I didn't realize it was going to be that big this month. I'd really rather not pay straight out of pocket and have my bank account balance be going lower. So I'm offering a sale in order to bring in some money to pay that off. So I don't have to worry about, my bank account getting lower or something like that, right? So it really can be a variety of different whys. However, the training one where you're actually, as a dance teacher, if you're actually looking to improve your teaching, right? Like that shows them that you're looking to bring them more, right? As students. So it's an added bonus, right? So if you're thinking of doing a future training of mine or anyone else's and you're like, ooh, the money is a little bit much for me right now, this is a great method to launch to be able to afford that, right? And get the money before you even have to pay for the training, right? So highly recommend it. Try it out. You might not get 20 lessons in 24 hours. It really depends on how many students you have, how much they love your teaching, all sorts of different things. But whatever you get, this method will work really well to get you more than you would normally offer if you offered a sale or if you just offered private lessons or something like that. You will definitely get more people using this method. So there you go. I recommend it. Try it out. Let me know your results. Share your results in the comments and let us know how many did you get and how quickly did you get them, and did it work for you? Did it not work for you? Just share your results and we'll try to help you if it didn't work from you, and we'll all learn from it if it did. All right, that's it for this bit of the training, and next we'll talk about your homework. All right, so I have some bonus homework for those of you that are just killing it in the training and you're ready to move on. You want to do a little bit more, a little bit sooner. This is homework that's also going to be in Module 5, I believe, or maybe Module 4, but I'm giving it to you a little bit early as well because for some of you, it will help in the earlier modules as well. Some of you, this is overload. It doesn't need to be done quite yet. But it's going to help everyone. It's just a matter of whether you need to focus on this yet or not. Really depends on your specific situation. So if you're feeling overloaded, don't worry about this. If you're feeling ready to take on a little bit more, then this is your bonus homework. It's to fill out the dancer section of your blueprint, right? So if you see your blueprint, there's the improve your dancing, improve your teaching, and improve your processes, right? And so the improve your dancing section, and even if you don't want to improve your own dancing, this is good for improving your students' dancing as well, right? Because it's really talking about like what methods do you use to improve your dancing, not what teaching methods do you use to improve someone else, right? But what specific skills do you develop in your dancing? So, I mean, on a very broad scale, it could be like connection and musicality, right? Those are two things that you try to practice on a regular basis to improve your dancing, right? They're not teaching methods, right? It's not how to teach connection or how to teach musicality. They're just topics that you work on. But I want you to get more granular, more specific than connection. I want you to think about very specifically what in connection do you focus on to improve your connection. For example, for me, I work on my 9 different arm techniques, right? And matching the 9 arms versus not matching the 9 arms. So those are 2 separate things, right? The 9 arms in general and matching them versus not matching the 9 arms. And then I look at, okay, what about grounding? Ground is another thing for me that I work on to improve my connection, right? What about my own balance? My own balance is something I actually use to improve my connection with my partner, as well as to improve my musicality, right? And then you might look at, okay, what about things for musicality? Maybe you improve the matching the volume of the song, or the energy of the song, or the feeling like behind the song, or the lyrics of the song, or the phrasing of the song. There's so many different things you might actually work on to improve within musicality. Within any topic or category you can think of, start thinking of what are the things behind that improve my dancing. And you can look at classes you've taken, classes you've taught. Just look at, what do you teach them? What are the things you're actually physically teaching them? And for some of you, it might be moves, right? It might be, okay, basic swing out, or basic tuck turn, or side hold, you know, or fancy moves, dips, tricks, anything like that is fine too. But basically write down everything that you might teach your students. And your homework right now is actually just to spend 5 minutes filling out the dancer section as much as you can. You're welcome to do more than that, but at least spend 5 minutes, right? Put a little timer on and start going. Start filling out things. And this is a brainstorm. Nothing is wrong. Just start adding topics to your list of your dancer section. And once 5 minutes is done, you can stop right there, or you can set the timer for another 5 minutes and go for another 5 minutes. And if you have the time, I'd recommend continuing until you kind of peter out and maybe you're only coming up with 2 or 3 things each 5 minutes. The first 5 minutes, you'll probably come up with 10, 20, 50 things. Who knows? Depends on how fast you can write, right? The second time, depending on how long you've been teaching, you might slow down and not come up with as much. Eventually, when you're only coming up with a few, that's when I would definitely stop and let those come to you as you teach lessons. You know, at the end of a lesson, you might come to your blueprint and fill it out a little bit more. It doesn't have to be perfect at first, but spend at least 5 minutes brainstorming all the different things that you do to improve your dancing or improve your students' dancing. Ideally, it would be both, right? The things that you do to improve your students is something you've done to improve yourself already. At the same time, you can also write things down that you haven't done or you haven't taught yet, and just don't make those a different color, or bold them, or don't bold them, underline them, don't underline them. Do something to stand out so that they're things you still want to do. Actually, I recommend underlining is a very easy way to underline all the things you already do, and then as you go, you can keep it exactly the same and underline something once you've started to do it. Right? That way you can keep a clear difference between what you do versus what you want to do eventually, and still add to the list without having to erase it or something, assuming you're writing it on paper. If you're doing it through some sort of online method, it's much easier to edit things. It doesn't matter as much your method of setting it up. So your thing should look something like this at the end. It should look like, you know, volume, energy, and I don't need to understand the words, right? Just like you might not understand what 9 arms is, right? I don't need to understand these. What I need is for you to understand them, so when you see them, it clicks in your head and you go, oh yeah, that's what I do. And this is going to set you up really well for describing your classes, for offering private lessons when you're one-on-one with someone, for when you're going to someone and asking them to hire you. You can tell them what you teach, right? It's really about setting up yourself for success in the future is what this section is all about. At the same time, you know, it's a little bit more advanced in that there's a lot of people that go out there and are successful without this, right? They just keep it in their head. Right? But if you keep it in your head, you're going to lose certain things, and you're just not going to be as on top of it as if you write it down and you see it every day before you go to class. You take a quick glance and it reminds you of everything you have to teach, so that when you're in class, spontaneously you can just bring something in that fits well with that group right there and adjust on the fly for them. So your list should be something like this and just builds and builds and builds. And if once you get more advanced, you might start segmenting things out and saying, okay, this stuff is musicality, so I'm going to have a musicality section. And then the other things are connection things, or maybe they're styling things, or maybe they're moves. Just depends on what you teach. You're going to start seeing your genres or your categories of what you teach and what you're really strong in, as well as what you're weak in, what you don't have that much in, which either you want to improve or you want to avoid completely and just say, that's not my thing. That's not my skill set. I'll let someone else teach that. Okay, so that's your bonus homework. Go ahead and get started on it now, or again, I will bring it back to you in either Module 4 or 5, depending on what I think is best for this group. All right, thanks a lot, and I'll see you in the next video.